Cador's Pacific Region, podcast number 6, Squamish. The Squamish Aerodrome is located on British Columbia's south coast at the head of Howe Sound, halfway between Vancouver and Whistler, and 5 nautical miles north of the town of Squamish. Runway 1533 is asphalt, 2,400 feet long and 75 feet wide. The aerodrome elevation is 171 feet. The aerodrome is uncontrolled and lies within a control area extension with a 700-foot AGL floor. The Vancouver Terminal Class Charlie control zone lies above that, starting at 8,500 ASL. There are no published instrument approaches for Squamish. Traffic includes helicopter logging operations and GA traffic. There is an ATF within 3 nautical miles to 2,500 feet, and there is a published VFR terminal procedures chart, which includes noise abatement procedures. The CFS cautions that strong surface winds may produce significant turbulence and/or downdrafts. In this episode, we have 3 Cador's reports occurring at Squamish to discuss. I'm Brad Crockett, a private pilot, single-engine land. Joining me is Manuel Erickson. Manuel holds a commercial pilot's license and is a former flight instructor. Manuel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Brad. It's an honor to be here and to have this opportunity to add to our knowledge of air safety.
Our first report is Cador's number 2002 P0527. NAV Canada and the Transportation Safety Board report that on June 22, 2002, at approximately 4:30 Zulu, Air Transat 862, an Airbus 330 that had departed Vancouver at 4:08 Zulu, heard a mayday call from a Spectrum Beaver BE55 ultralight, registration India Foxtrot Bravo Kilo. The pilot reported that he was going to do a precautionary landing on a glacier. The pilot conducted the landing and then was able to relay information via 121.5 to other aircraft in the area that he was the sole occupant and was safe, although the nose wheel was torn off. An RCMP helicopter was dispatched and rescued the uninjured pilot from the glacier. The pilot was picked up at 5:08 Zulu. The aircraft was on a local pleasure flight from Squamish over the Squamish Glacier when one cylinder of the Rotax 503 engine began to misfire. That's the end of the report. Manuel, it seems like the pilot in this case took all the right measures. Would you agree?
Yes, I would. I wonder if the pilot transmitted the reason for the precautionary landing on a glacier, which was engine trouble. It's obvious that because his landing was precautionary, he had partial power, but perhaps it wasn't enough to land back at Squamish. The 503 is a 2-cylinder, 2-stroke engine producing only 50 horsepower and would require all the available power when it's needed, so height above ground is crucial. Also, if I'm figuring local time correctly, Zulu minus 7 hours for daylight time, 21:30 is a bit late in the day to fly over a glacier, especially in an ultralight with a 2-stroke 503. Anything can happen, and it did. The only thing I might have done differently is not to have planned an ultralight flight with a 503 engine over a glacier in the first place, and not at that time in the day. With only 2 cylinders, the 503 is underpowered. I'm glad he hadn't a passenger, which would probably have been illegal, unless he was licensed to instruct in ultralights.
Our second report is Cador's number 2003 P126. NAV Canada reports that on February 5, 2003 at 5:45 Zulu, November 655 Gulf Sierra was on a flight planned to Vancouver. However, while receiving flight following from Vancouver Terminal, the pilot elected to change the destination to Squamish and did not advise flight services. The flight became overdue and, when eventually tracked down, the pilot apologized, saying they thought Vancouver Terminal would automatically advise flight services of the destination change. That's the end of the report. Which air traffic service units provide for VFR flight plan changes?
I assume the flight was VFR. If I were conducting such a flight, I would have contacted Vancouver Terminal on 125.2 or Pacific Radio on 123.15 for changes to my flight plan. Another pilot I know with an IFR rating said the pilot made a reasonable error in assuming that ATC would update his flight plan automatically, but he pointed out that in Canada, this is done only for IFR flights. So an ATS unit should have been advised. That unit would have told the pilot to contact Pacific Radio. The pilot should also have closed his flight plan after landing. So he broke Canadian regulations and caused an expensive search to be conducted. Only IFR flight plans are closed by ATS without a request. It seems he didn't know Canadian procedures. That said, I'm glad the flight landed safely.
Does it matter whether you're in controlled or uncontrolled airspace at the time of the request?
I would think it would make no difference because the flight was on a flight plan. Unless the pilot had made a request for a change to the plan, he should have followed his plan. I see that the aircraft has a U.S. registration and assume that the flight originated in the U.S., with a stop at a Canadian customs airport. If so, after customs clearance, he took off, then altered his destination from Vancouver to Squamish without informing ATS. I think that is as much against the American regulations as it is against the Canadian ones.
Does it matter how you phrase the request?
Probably not, as long as the request is made clearly, understandably, and with a certain firmness. ATC would have informed the pilot if the request could not be granted. I think the pilot was a bit cavalier about flying in Canada.
Our final report is Cador's number 2004 P2289. NAV Canada reports that on December 12, 2004, at 22:57 Zulu, the Nanaimo Flight Service Station heard a Cessna 172, registration Golf Oscar Papa Victor, transmitting Mayday Mayday on 121.5. The position of the 172 was unknown. An overfly aircraft tried to contact the 172 but received no response. The Nanaimo Flight Service Station tried to contact twice but did not receive any response. The Nanaimo Flight Service Station advised the Rescue Coordination Center and the Vancouver Area Control Center shift manager. Information that was received approximately 20 minutes later indicated that it was a student pilot making a practice Mayday broadcast in the vicinity of the Squamish Aerodrome. Apparently, the student pilot had become so engrossed and excited that he accidentally keyed his transmit button at the same time that he was practicing. That's the end of the report. This sounds like something anyone could accidentally do.
Agreed. I hope the flight school and the instructor were both informed and that the student received some retraining.
If we were to realize that we had accidentally done this on 121.5, what would be the best course of action to correct the error?
Immediately after realizing the error, a licensed pilot would probably transmit another call on 121.5 explaining the error and canceling the Mayday.
That's it for this episode. You can reach the podcast by email at pacific@cadors.ca. Manuel, how can people reach you?
I'm at pilot80@shaw.ca.
Thank you, Manuel. And thank you for listening as we take advantage of our license to learn. Please note that for the most part, Transport Canada Cadors reports contain preliminary, unconfirmed data which can be subject to change. This podcast is provided by cadors.ca, not by Transport Canada or any other government agency.